Hugh Jackman breaks his silence, the truth behind the divorce, with Deborra-Lee Furness, a marriage of decades. Hugh Jackman finally crumbles beneath the weight of truth. For years, Hugh Jackman stood as the picture of grace, of loyalty, of the man who never cracked, no matter how intense the spotlight. He was the one who smiled through interviews, held Deborra-Lee Furness's hand tightly on red carpets, and publicly honored the sanctity of his long-standing marriage. But behind that charming smile, there was a storm brewing. A storm that he had kept chained deep inside, until now. What the public never saw was the quiet suffering, the little humiliations, the dismissive glances, the emotional neglect that slowly chipped away at his strength. It wasn't one loud argument or one public scandal that destroyed them. It was the years of slow erosion, the moments when he wasn't heard, the evenings when he came home after grueling film shoots, only to be met with coldness instead of warmth, the unspoken expectations that drained him, the growing silence between them, loud and unrelenting. And through it all, Hugh remained silent. He told himself it was normal, that marriage required sacrifice, that love meant endurance. But he was enduring too much. He became a man who smiled while carrying invisible wounds, who gave the world Wolverine, Jean Valjean, and P.T. Barnum, all while losing himself at home. Friends whispered that something had changed in him over the years. He became quieter, more withdrawn. Behind the camera, behind the glowing praise, he was slowly fading. "He's tired," they said. "He needs a break." But it wasn't the roles, or the fame, or even the pressure. It was the home he returned to, the place that no longer felt like refuge. There was one evening, not too long before the final announcement, when Hugh stood on a stage, accepting a Lifetime Achievement Award. He thanked everyone, his fans, his colleagues, even Deborra. But those who knew him saw it. The break in his voice, the glance toward the floor, the tears he blinked away quickly. That wasn't gratitude. That was goodbye. Privately, Hugh had begun writing. Pages and pages of unspoken grief, letters he never sent. Sentences that started with, "Why didn't you ever see me?" and "I tried. I really tried." In those scribbled journals, his real voice lived, not the polished, media-trained actor, but the man who had suffered in silence, believing he owed it to love to never give up. But how much is a man expected to carry? How long can you smile through neglect? Hugh had poured everything into their relationship, his youth, his loyalty, his fame. And yet, Deborra-Lee had stopped seeing him, not just as a man, but as a soul in need. She had grown distant, dismissive. Words became sparse, intimacy vanished, respect turned into routine. And Hugh, always the optimist, kept waiting for the tides to turn back. He shielded her for years. When rumors arose, he denied them. When tabloids speculated, he smiled and waved. Even when close friends urged him to talk, to open up, he'd respond with, "It's fine. I'm fine." But it wasn't. Not for a long time. There was one moment that changed everything. A quiet Sunday morning. Hugh, sitting in the kitchen, tried to share a deeply personal fear about aging, about feeling invisible. Deborra-Lee barely looked up from her phone. "You're being dramatic," she said, not even glancing at him. And something in him shattered. That was the moment he realized he was alone in this marriage. It took months after that for him to find the courage to step away. He wasn't just walking away from Deborra. He was walking toward the man he had buried to make the relationship work. The artist. The dreamer. The lover who wanted to be seen. The boy from Sydney who believed in big, eternal love. Now Hugh Jackman is finally breaking his silence, not with rage or blame, but with truth, with the raw, aching honesty of someone who loved too much, too long, without asking for enough in return. He's telling the story not to attack her, but to reclaim himself, to show the world, and perhaps himself, that even the strongest, most beloved hearts can break when ignored for too long. He gave the best years of his life to a woman who stopped seeing his light. And now, at last, he is stepping back into it. What happens next? He doesn't know. He's not promising anything. He's just speaking for the first time. And sometimes that's all a man needs to do. Finally speak and let the silence end. He sat in his favorite chair by the window, the same one he had taken with him from his parents' house in Sydney when he first moved in with Deborra-Lee. It was old, worn at the edges, with the fabric faded by sunlight and time, but it was his. And in those final months, when everything in his world was quietly crumbling, that chair became his companion. He would sit there sometimes for hours, just staring out, the silence of the house wrapping around him like a cold, invisible blanket. There were still photos of them on the mantelpiece, smiling, laughing, pretending. Hugh would glance at them occasionally, each time feeling a pang of something he couldn't quite name. Not regret. He never regretted trying. But sorrow, maybe. That it hadn't turned out the way he had promised himself it would. That love, no matter how fiercely you believe in it, sometimes just isn't enough when only one person is still trying. He would make coffee in the mornings, always enough for two, a habit ingrained over the decades. He'd leave her cup by the sink. Most days it remained untouched. She didn't rise early anymore, or perhaps she just didn't want to share those quiet mornings with him. Little things began to feel like heartbreaks. The way she stopped waiting for him to come home. How her eyes didn't light up when he walked through the door. How the conversations turned shallow. Grocery lists, calendar reminders, and an occasional forced smile when they had to appear in public. Hugh, who had always believed in the sacredness of connection, began to feel like an afterthought in his own marriage. He kept journals, not because he was planning a tell-all, but because he needed a place to remember who he was. In one entry, he had written, "There's a version of me I barely recognize anymore. I was vibrant once, playful, romantic. I used to sing to her in the kitchen, remember? She used to laugh. We used to be something. Now, I speak, and the room stays quiet." He started walking more. Around the block, through the park, past the little flower shop where he once bought her tulips every Tuesday. The florist still smiled at him, handing over a small bouquet without asking. Hugh would take them home, place them in the vase by the dining table, and wait to see if she'd notice. She rarely did. Once, he found an old birthday card in a drawer. It was from their early years. Her handwriting was loopy and affectionate. "You're the best thing that's ever happened to me." He stared at that line for a long time, then closed the drawer quietly. And the house? It had changed too. Once filled with laughter, music, the chaos of children running, and dogs barking, now it echoed. A kind of emptiness lingered in the halls. He would pass by the piano and touch the keys softly, remembering how they used to sing together. Now the instrument sat untouched, like a relic of a forgotten time. There was a scarf she used to wear, navy blue with white dots. He loved that scarf. It reminded him of a trip to Italy, of wine under the stars, and her laughter echoing through the vineyard. One morning, when she rushed past him to go to a lunch he hadn't been invited to, she dropped it. He picked it up and held it for a moment. It still smelled faintly of her perfume. He didn't say anything, just folded it and left it on the banister. The breaking point wasn't dramatic. There were no slammed doors or raised voices. It was a dinner, just the two of them. He had cooked, her favorite, lamb with rosemary. She sat across from him, scrolling through her phone. He asked her something, he doesn't remember what, and she didn't answer, didn't even look up, just mumbled something and stood to leave before dessert. And in that moment, Hugh felt it. A wave of grief so profound it almost knocked the air from his lungs. He sat there long after she'd gone to bed. The candles burned down to puddles of wax. The lamb grew cold. And he knew. He didn't sleep that night. He walked through the house, touching the walls, the framed drawings from their children, the light switch she used to flick 3 times before bed. A silly habit he had always found adorable. It all felt like a museum now, a beautiful collection of moments, preserved and lifeless. The next morning, he wrote her a letter. Not out of anger, but as a release. It wasn't bitter. It simply said, "I love you. I always have. But I can't keep loving you alone. And I think we both know, deep down, we've already said goodbye a long time ago. We just never had the courage to admit it." He didn't know if she read it. She never responded. But 3 days later, the official announcement came. "We have decided to separate, with mutual respect and love." The press release read, but that wasn't the story. The real story was this. A man, beloved by millions, had spent years fading in the very place he should have been, most alive. He gave everything to a love that stopped loving back. He kept the silence, protected her, even protected the illusion, for years. And now, finally, he chose himself. Hugh Jackman, the man the world saw as unbreakable, had broken. Quietly, softly, over time. And when he put himself back together, piece by painful piece, he did so not with rage, but with grace. His voice, once hidden behind years of silent endurance, was finally being heard, and in that voice, trembling but resolute, was the truth of a man who dared to walk away from the person he loved, to become the person he forgot he was. And so the curtain rises, not on a new role, but on the truest performance of his life. One where he no longer has to pretend. One where the silence is finally, irrevocably broken. There are details we may never fully understand. Why did she stop calling him darling? When exactly did the light in her eyes go out when he walked into the room? And what truly passed between them in those long silences, the ones that felt louder than any argument could ever be? Hugh never told the whole story, not to the press, not even to his closest friends. Not yet. He's careful, measured. The words he chooses are deliberate, polished on the surface, but underneath, if you listen closely, you can almost hear the pain echoing through them like a distant piano note. He appears at events with a smile, subtle, slightly worn, the same smile he's worn for years. But those who know him, who've seen his eyes before and after the camera's flash, can tell. Something lingers behind them now, a sliver of sorrow, of loss, or perhaps of something deeper, something unspoken. There was talk of a manuscript, a private memoir, unpublished, unfinished. Rumors say he's been writing at night, alone in a small studio in Bondi Beach, overlooking the ocean. He stays there for hours, sometimes past midnight. No staff, no visitors, just Hugh, a notebook, and a battered acoustic guitar in the corner. A man and his thoughts. Some say he's writing it for the world. Others say he's writing it for her, or for the version of her that once held him like he mattered more than the applause. But no one has seen the pages. No one knows if they ever will. What is known, what's certain, is that something inside him changed. Quietly, profoundly. And though the world continues to spin, though he steps on stage and cameras still adore him, something has been left behind in that house he no longer calls home. He never confirmed the date he left. No official record of when he packed his things, when the wedding band slipped off his finger, or when he stopped saying "we" and started saying "I." These transitions happen softly, like fog lifting at dawn. You only realize it's gone once the sky is clear again. There's a drawer in his study that he keeps locked. He's joked about it once, offhand, during an interview. Said it's where the old ghosts live. The interviewer laughed. Hugh didn't. That drawer, by all accounts, contains letters. Dozens, maybe more. Written over years. Some addressed to Deborah, others to no one in particular. Some never opened. Others tear-stained. What do they say? Did he beg? Did he blame? Did he simply mourn? No one knows. One former co-star remembers a moment backstage, months before the announcement. Hugh had been staring at his phone, motionless, while everyone else bustled around. She asked if he was okay. He looked up slowly and said, "I miss being missed," then smiled and changed the subject. There's a recording, private, never aired, of Hugh singing a song at a closed-door rehearsal. A haunting rendition of "Not While I'm Around." His voice cracked midway. He didn't stop, kept singing. By the final note, the room was silent. Even the sound techs didn't move. It was in that voice, trembling, human, imperfect, that the truth lived. Not in statements or press releases, not in speculation or headlines, but in that raw, aching expression of something too complex to name. Some fans have speculated about clues in his recent performances. A lingering glance during a monologue. The way his characters seem more fractured now, more haunted. Art imitating life, or life bleeding into art. A photographer caught him recently on a bench, just off 6th Avenue in New York. He was alone, no entourage, no staged pose, just sitting, staring at a couple walking past, hand in hand. There was a quietness to the shot, a man surrounded by movement, yet completely still, as if time had paused just for him. And Deborah? She said little, almost nothing. A few words to a tabloid, something about growth and private journeys. But those close to her say she's changed too, that the spark she once carried has dimmed, that she avoids certain songs, certain streets, certain questions, that sometimes, when she thinks no one is watching, she looks lost. What happened between them in those final years? Was it betrayal? Indifference? Was it just time, quietly unraveling the threads of a once beautiful tapestry? Or was it something more mysterious? Something neither of them can name, let alone explain. The truth, perhaps, doesn't live in any single moment or revelation. Maybe it's scattered, like dust in the corners of their old home. In a half-drunk cup of tea. In a voicemail never returned. In a pair of shoes left by the door long after he had gone. What we're left with is a puzzle, pieces that almost fit, but not quite. Glimpses, hints, whispers. He walks differently now. Straighter, some say. Lighter, others insist. But still, always, with a trace of melancholy, like a man who survived the storm but hasn't quite forgotten the sound of thunder. He hasn't spoken publicly since the announcement. Not truly, not fully. He's done interviews, press tours, photo ops, but he hasn't spoken. Not the way people are waiting for him to. Not the way she might be waiting for him to. And so, the silence hums again. Not the silence of fear, but of waiting. Of anticipation. Of the moment before the curtain rises again. Because we know this man. We've watched him become kings and monsters and dreamers. We know he doesn't stay quiet forever. We know the story's not done. There's still something he's holding back. And whatever it is, when it comes, if it comes, may not just change how we see him. It may change how we see ourselves. He never really left the kitchen light on. But lately, he had started to. Just one small, warm bulb, glowing against the dark silence of his new place. Maybe it was habit. Maybe it was hope. Maybe, on some level, he imagined she might call one night, say she was driving past, ask if she could come in for a cup of tea, ask how he's been, ask how the kids are, ask what happened to them. But the phone stayed still, and the silence, once suffocating, now settled into something else, something familiar. He had learned to live within it. His days were filled with the practical now. Scripts to read, events to attend, meetings about projects that would take him far from everything that reminded him of her. But the nights were his, and in them something quiet moved, like an invisible current beneath still water. A memory, a breath, the weight of words unspoken. He would find her in odd places, not literally, but in the echoes she left behind. The scent of a certain soap in a hotel room, the rustling of paper when he opened a new script, just like the ones they used to read together, side by side on the couch, feet tangled under a blanket neither of them could ever agree on. The sound of jazz in an elevator, the kind she used to hum softly when she cooked. And sometimes, when he was alone enough, tired enough, still enough, he'd let himself answer the questions he kept locked away. Would she have loved him better if he had been a different man? Had she simply fallen out of love? Or had he too? Did she ever lie awake like he did, wondering if she'd let the best thing in her life slip between her fingers? He would never know. Not really. The tabloids speculated. New woman? Secret betrayal? Midlife crisis? They threw words like darts, hoping to hit something that would bleed. But Hugh said nothing. Not because he had nothing to say, but because too much of what mattered couldn't be said in interviews, couldn't be reduced to sound bites or headlines. It lived in pauses, in glances, in the things not written. Somewhere in his phone, buried in the Notes app between reminders to call his agent and lists of favorite wines, there was a draft of a message. Not long, just a few lines. I saw a woman today who walked like you, and I realized I still know the sound of your footsteps better than my own heartbeat. He never sent it. It sat there, glowing faintly in the dark, like the kitchen light. And Deborah? She remained elusive, spotted at an art exhibit, laughing with old friends. Brief comments in glossy interviews, always vague, always polished. We shared something beautiful. We grew apart. I'll always admire him. Words wrapped in velvet, smooth and non-committal. But one reporter claimed she saw her pause at a question. Something about regrets. Something about time. The camera flashed, and she looked down for just a second longer than necessary. When she looked back up, the smile was there again. But something had changed. As for Hugh, he had a new film coming. A dramatic role. Critics whispered it was the performance of his life. Raw, stripped, wounded, a man unraveled. When asked if the role was personal, he just nodded. It came from somewhere real, he said. Somewhere real. The premiere night came and went. Standing ovations, tears in the audience, paparazzi lights, glittering gowns. But he left early. No after-party. Just a quiet car ride home. A half-eaten sandwich in the fridge. The same chair by the same window, now overlooking a different street. Some nights he would go out late, wandering, cap pulled low, unnoticed. Past the old bookstore where he once bought her a novel she never read. Past the restaurant where they spent an anniversary pretending to be happy for the sake of the kids. Past the small park bench near the opera house, where she once told him, softly, that she never thought she'd fall in love with a man like him. And he wondered, had she meant it? Did she still? One rainy night, he sat at that bench again, alone. A stranger walked by and recognized him. They didn't ask for a photo. They just said, "You look peaceful." He smiled, not because he agreed, but because it was easier. Peace was a strange thing. It didn't feel like triumph. It didn't feel like freedom. It felt like standing in the middle of a field after a fire. The air still smells of smoke. The earth is still blackened. But the sky? The sky is wide open. Some stories don't end the way they're supposed to. They just shift, fade, turn the page without warning. You expect a bang, but you get a whisper. A door that closes without a sound. A cup left half full. A goodbye that never gets said out loud. And so Hugh lives now in that space, that undefined place between healing and remembering, between what was and what might have been. He doesn't speak of her much anymore, not in interviews, not even to friends. But every so often, he'll say something about a favorite dish, or an inside joke, or the way a certain song always gets stuck in his head. And if you're paying attention, you'll know. She's still there, somewhere in the seams. As for the rest, that part remains unwritten. And maybe that's where it belongs.